If you're a regular viewer of this network, and I know you all are, like me, you watch our next guest every day at 2 o'clock. My friend and colleague Katy Tur has followed up her very, very successful and exciting New York Times best-selling book about her experience covering Trump and the Trump campaign with a news story. In some ways more wild and others more heartbreaking. Her own. Katy's book, Rough Draft, a memoir, tells her story, starting from her childhood, raised in the skies from her parents' news helicopter, to her complicated relationship with her dad, to her rise as a broadcast journalist covering the streets of Brooklyn, to the Boston Marathon bombing, to being right here at this desk a couple hours before me every day at 30 Rock. Joining me now is my friend Katy Tur. So, you know, I read it. You gave it to me, and I read it, and it is so good. And it is so harrowing personally and heroic professionally. And I wonder if in your head those were like two threads for you, or is it all connected?
They were. And then I realized as I kept going that they were really interconnected. There was no way to take one and separate it from the other. I am who I am because of the way I grew up, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes it was pretty ugly.
You write about your mom and your dad, and I've seen the other. I know we're going to start with your dad. I want to start with your mom. The last line of the book is about what an incredible journalist your mom is.
And my mom never got any of the credit. So my parents, just to give some backstory if anyone doesn't know, my parents were helicopter news journalists in the 80s and 90s in Los Angeles, and they covered every breaking story that you saw on TV.
Sean Penn and Madonna.
Sean Penn and Madonna
OJ.
getting married and giving them the finger. OJ on the slow-speed pursuit, the Reginald Denny beating during the riots, the guy that got pulled out of the red gravel truck, any police pursuit, any Malibu fire. It was my parents that shot it. And my mom was the camera woman. I mean, she would hang out of the helicopter, just strapped in with a belt, and look down with a Betacam, 40-pound Betacam on her shoulder, and shoot the news that was unfolding below her. Sometimes during the riots, they were getting shot at in the helicopter, and they found bullet fragments in the battery below her seat. She was brave. And she was incredible as a journalist. She still is, both of those things. But she didn't get the credit because my dad was the brand, bombastic and out there and really compelling. And there was one instance, and I wanted to set it right in the book, where my mom shot the Reginald Denny beating, again, with the bullet holes and everything. And
in the helicopter.
In the helicopter. And they won an Emmy for this coverage. And she wasn't on it. Her name wasn't on it. It was taken off by the news director, and they added a couple of people who worked on the desk. All the men conspired to take the only woman off of it. And I feel like that's so unfair. And I wanted to acknowledge that she was and is amazing.
Well, you do that. And I mean, the last line of the epilogue is this book is not about score settling except one. And it's your mom's name on the image.
That's it, exactly.
We could talk for 3 hours about all your storytelling about your childhood and about your dad. But I want to just ask you to talk about the call you got when you're covering the Boston Marathon, about tea to hamburger. I think you described it as the first meal that didn't come in a to-go pack. Tell the story.
It was a crazy day. Well, it was a crazy story. I ran up to Boston to cover the marathon bombings, and it felt like a professional coup because I got there before any other network correspondent, and it was a big story, and it was early on in my career. And at this point, and there's a lot of backstory, it's in the book, my dad and I had a strained relationship. And a note about pronouns. When I talk about my dad, well, I'll tell you. Okay, so I'm sitting on the bed, and I'm eating a hamburger, and my dad calls, and I remember thinking to myself, do I have the energy for this right now? Because, again, it was strained. And I answered the phone, and my dad said, Katy, are you sitting down? Catherine, are you sitting down? And I said, yeah. And my dad said, I'm not Bob Tur, I'm Zoe Tur.
It's the first time.
I'm a woman. And it at the time took me by such surprise because my dad flew helicopters, wore leather jackets, was, you know, like punched cops, like super masculine, super in your face. And it was a wild thing to be told in the middle, anytime, but in the middle of a news story. And it was before Orange is the New Black, before Laverne Cox was a household name, before Caitlyn Jenner. Didn't have the vocabulary. And it was an interesting...
It's also your dad.
It's my dad, you know, and it was interesting because from an outsider perspective, interesting just to experience it, but from my perspective, I had to wrestle with what makes a person, what makes you who you are. And my dad at the time felt like going from Bob Tur to Zoe Tur meant that everything that Bob Tur did was expunged. Bob Tur is dead, he told me. Hard thing for a kid to hear. And that precipitated, or it laid even more bare how complicated our relationship was.
Well, you wanted him to own all parts of being your father,
the person,
right?
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to talk about the way we grew up and the violence, the emotional violence, the physical violence. I wanted to have a reckoning with it, because if we're going to move forward together, let's talk about it. I mean, and let's celebrate the good stuff and let's understand the bad stuff, but let's do it together. And I wanted this, and my dad just didn't want to do it. And now we're estranged, and it sucks and it's hard. I miss my dad, and my grandkids miss their grandfather.
Yeah, your kid. I mean,
my kids miss their grandfather.
I wanted to ask you about. It seems like a book that maybe only a mom can write, right? Because it's when you have your own kids that you're reaching around them with all your might, and you're also reaching forward to your parents, and you just want to stand between those two intact relationships.
But you also want to be the best version of yourself. And for me, this was, in order to be the best mom I can be, the best wife I can be, the best person, anchor, journalist, everything that I can be, I had to go back to go forward. And I'd been running away from my childhood for 15, 16 years. Literally running in some cases. I moved to London.
All over the world.
All over the world. And for me to be a better version, I needed to confront it so that I didn't allow that rage, which my dad had and which I sometimes will feel in myself, take over. It's cliche, but to break the cycle.
So we work in this world where our beloved viewers are the exception. There's a lot of nastiness that gets directed at us. And to put your whole story out there, your whole family out there, your whole self out there was just so inspiring. Nobody writes about their story at a point when they can't put a bow on it. And it was so beautiful and so brave. And I get to talk to you about it for a whole hour tonight at the 92nd Street Y.
And we hopefully get to talk a little bit about the hearings and
the hearings
and how
and your love story. I mean, your love story is also, we buried the lead, but there's a beautiful love story that you tell, and I'd never seen it in so much detail. And it's beautiful.
I love my husband.
After reading the book, I love your husband. It's really, congratulations. And
thank you, Nicole.
Without sounding weird, I'm so proud to have you as a friend and a colleague. It's a beautiful story.
I'm so proud to have you as a friend and a colleague. I'm going to start crying.
Don't make me cry.
I'm getting all verklempt.
No, it's so good. I mean, and we should let everybody read it and then come back, because I think you write about things that are really hard for people not only to write about, but to even talk about, and especially from your perch as someone so accomplished. And, I think a lot of people look at your life and think you're perfect, and you tell these stories, and you are, but to talk about the journey was just really amazing.
I try to write about it in a way that is real and authentic and honest, but is also kind of fun. I mean, there are some funny moments. I hope you laugh if you read it. I intend for you to laugh along the way, because life is not all good, not all bad. It's everything all at once.
Between. Exactly. Well, I can't wait to talk to you more. Thank you for coming here and talking to us about it. It's called Rough Draft. It's out right now. Read it, buy it. You will love it. You will cry. Thank you for spending some time with us to talk about it.